Okay, so today we're going to be talking about At The Existentialist Cafe by Sarah Bakewell, but instead of talking about the whole book or the author's writing or whatever, I'm just going to sort of discuss some of the most important or most interesting ideas that I came across while reading it, and then if you find that interesting, you can go read the book for yourself. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name's Christian. I'm a CPA and senior financial analyst, which has nothing to do with this video, but that's my introduction. So let's just jump into it. I came across At The Existentialist Cafe because I was looking for a light, beach-friendly read to bring with me when I went on vacation this summer. And at the same time, I kind of realized that I don't really know anything about existentialism or that branch of philosophy, and I just sort of wanted to learn more. So after doing some research, I thought this book sounded perfect, it sounded interesting, and I decided to go with it, and I am really glad that I did. In general, the book is an easy, narrative-like history on 20th century existentialism through the lives of the people who brought this philosophy to the mainstream. Who they were, their lifestyles, their behaviors, their interactions with each other, and of course their ideas. So you'll see on the cover some names at the top, and this is sort of the main cast. Before I get into it, I'm gonna butcher a lot of names here, and I apologize. But Sartre and de Beauvoir really fill out the bulk of the narrative. They were life partners and a very powerful duo in the arena of existentialist philosophy. But Camus, Heidegger, Husserl, Jaspers, and Merleau-Ponty all play a pretty big role as well. And if you don't know any of these names or any of these people, don't worry, I didn't know them either. Like I said, I'm not a huge philosophy buff, but what I can say and why I think this book is such a great introduction to existentialism is that I now feel like I do know them. And I feel like I know them as people, not in terms of the depth of understanding their ideas. If you were to take a philosophy course, to read their books, have debates and arguments and write papers, but as flawed individuals and the way that they lived their beliefs through their lives. And I think that's one of the great things about these philosophers and why Bakewell was able to write such a good book on them is because the philosophers themselves believed deeply in living out your beliefs. So by understanding who they were, you in turn gain an understanding of their ideas. So with that out of the way, the first idea that really stuck with me when I read the book is Sartre's definition and thoughts on what it means to be free. What he says is that we often think of freedom as being unconstrained, being able to do whatever we want or live however we want or say whatever we want at any time. We think of cultural or family or societal pressures and natural restrictions on the way we live to constrain our freedom and hold us back. Like for example, maybe you feel like you can't pursue the career you want to pursue because your family would look negatively on that and they expect you to go on and do something else with your life. You might interpret that as restricting your freedom. But Sartre would say that that's not true. What he believed was that these restrictions are what make our decisions meaningful, and that the ability to choose a direction or an outlook despite these constraints are what it means to be free. And he takes a very extreme stance to this and brings up a very intense example. He talks of a prisoner of war facing imprisonment and death. And he says that even this person is free because they can choose how to face death. And for me, well, that's a lot more extreme. I think of Minecraft. I think of survivor mode and creative mode. Creative mode is the way we typically think of freedom. You can fly around, you have unlimited resources, you can't die, you can basically shape the world in whichever way that you want. But Sartre would disagree, and he would say that survival mode is freedom because your decisions have weight and they have meaning behind them. Do you continue chopping down that tree for wood, or do you call it a day, you find a bed and you rest until morning to avoid the scary monsters at nighttime? So without the pressures of life, we can't have any meaning. And I just found this pretty powerful. I think that thinking in this way maybe creates a little bit more gratitude in terms of the challenges that we face in our life. I think in the Western world, it's easy to look on social media or look at your friends and say, oh, if I had that job, I would be happier. If I had more free time, I'd be happier. If I got that promotion, I'd be happier. But all of the context and pressures and challenges we face every day are what give our lives meaning in the first place. And our requirement to navigate all these challenges is what creates the value that we feel in life. Okay, so interesting point number 2 that I got out of the book is less of an idea and more of an appreciation for how everything that's going on around us and history and life in general is all just cyclical. This has happened before and it will probably happen again. Like, I don't really think it's controversial to say that we are living in a time where trust in traditional institutions is being increasingly dissolved or diminished. News organizations, government, education, even trust with our employers in real life, so to speak. And yet, because of the time period that these philosophers lived, the book consistently reminded me of how dark the 20th century was and how much more extreme all of the problems that we're feeling today were in that century compared to this one. So, for example, after World War II, Europe had been utterly destroyed. The news of the Nazi death camps was beginning to come into the public light, and 2 atomic bombs had been dropped on Japan. I think it's probably difficult for those of us born after this period or who have been fortunate enough not to experience a similar level of catastrophe in our lives to understand how scary, horrifying, and existentially unsettling this time must have been. For most people, any sense of innate human morality or goodwill in leadership had been laid bare. And what was interesting to read about was how this tragedy, well, very much a tragedy, also led to the rise of individualism and a greater sense of personal responsibility and political involvement throughout most of Western society, which generally led to some of the civil rights movements and the desire for freedom throughout our culture. So, a less extreme than atomic weapons or industrial death camps, we obviously do have plenty of issues in the greater world today. And I don't know if we will see similar positive outcomes come from it, but I wouldn't bet against it at this point. And sort of better understanding the philosophical history of one of the most destructive 100 years in human history, I found it in a way comforting to know that we as people of the world have been through challenges before and have been able to rise to greater things despite it. Okay, and on a much lighter note, the last point that I wanted to discuss is just how amusing I found it, how many of these great thinkers struggled with focus and finishing the works that they said that they would complete. To give an example, 2 of the most important works in existential philosophy are Being and Nothingness and Being and Time by Sartre and Heidegger, respectively. And both these books are not finished. In both books, and in plenty of others referenced throughout the book, the authors make specific note that they will reveal their big idea or finish on the great conclusion in the second part, and those parts never came. And when I was reading this, I was like, dude, I can totally relate to this. I suffer from this so much. I try all these different things and I make these big plans, and then after a few months I just get tired of it and I never finish. And it's just so annoying. And I don't struggle with this in sort of my work career life or with other pursuits like at the gym. I can stay consistent with those, but I don't know, I just don't understand myself in this regard. Yet, it seems like these brilliant 20th century speakers suffer from the same thing as I do. But I think it is important to realize that despite their inability to finish projects, they still had major impacts on their respective fields. And I think that speaks to the importance of sharing your work and putting your work out there, even if it's unfinished. I think a lot of us suffer from this sort of perfectionism where we don't want to share our work until it's done, or that others are going to judge us, so it has to be perfect. But what these philosophers clearly thought and how they lived is that they need to share what they're working on, and they'll finish up their work later or they'll come back and make edits. But the important thing was to share and to put your work out there and have it be almost tested by society. And I think by doing this, they not only created a name for themselves, but they became who they were, because by sharing these things, they created opportunities, it got noticed, and they were able to have an impact on the world. Okay, well, that's that. If you enjoyed it, you might like one of my other videos. Let me know your thoughts as well. Have you read the book? Do you disagree? Do you agree with what I'm saying? Please let me know and subscribe, and I'll talk to you next time.